You've got the magic touch. Makes me glow so much. It casts a spell. It rings a bell. The magic touch.
Ooh. As I was speaking to you last week, you may recall, I love a good magic show, and nothing epitomizes magic more like fireworks, which is sad that now I have a conflicting relationship with them, but nonetheless, I still find them magical, and it's incredible that we get to experience them so often in the United States, at least. One great way of experiencing magic such as this is if you are a sci-fi fan, you may recall this scene from The Lord of the Rings where Gandalf is celebrating an old hobbit's birthday party with some fabulous fireworks that he created. Now, I love this scene because it's so, in a way, awe-inspiring as well as slightly frightening once those rockets start coming towards the citizens so people don't know what to do. And I just remember seeing this scene and being like, wow, movie magic, it's incredible. But they also managed to translate this amazing literary book into something we could see on screen. Another literature sci-fi that I really fell in love with, kind of sadly in college, should have been older, but nonetheless, of course, this phenomenon swept the world. Speaking, of course, of the Harry Potter series. And it is all about fantasy and magic in a whole different realm, a whole different world possible, including and up to magic and learning magic. Going to school is this whole basis of this series. And in that series of books, one of the things that I remember distinctly is the newspapers, all of the images would be moving. Same deal with the photographs on the walls. They would be moving and thinking, you know, my gosh, that's such magical creative thought process. But if you could notice from the GIF previously shown, that's something that already exists. In fact, my speaking to you is just an amazing feat of magic no matter what. Recently, Frank and I have become obsessed with this show called The Carbonara Effect. It's on basic cable, True TV channel, and it is a fabulous show. I think it's just in its first season, probably only has about 10 episodes so far. But this young gentleman, Mr. Carbonaro, is a accomplished in-person magician, and here on the left you can see that he's pulling out a little puppy out of what was a flat envelope, and in fact he was kind of like punching the envelope to just make sure that, you know, it was totally flat. Meanwhile, this unsuspecting receptionist who handed him the flat envelope sees with amazement how he pulls a puppy out of the envelope and is just completely flabbergasted, and just the look on her face. And that's the case with most of the acts that Mr. Carbonara performs in front of people. People have two reactions. Either they are completely shocked and just want to believe what they've just experienced, or they are shocked and also can't figure it out and need to figure out and have a lot of questions to ask. Which is funny because as we were watching the television show, Mr. Frank Lloyd, my boyfriend, made it a big point to point out that people want to believe the impossible. And I agree, but I also think that some people can't believe the impossible. They need to understand why. How did that happen? This is just so outside of the realm of my possibility that something must be different. I'm missing the point. There's some trick that I'm not getting. And it is true, it really just depends on how that trick was performed, whether you can have that belief and that amazement, or just kind of question everything that ever happened to you in front of your eyes. Of course, we know that one of the most famous magicians or illusionists is Mr. Harry Houdini, and he wrote a book called Handcuffed Secrets. In that book, he has this quote that says, "Remember, it is not the trick itself that is important, but the style and manner in which it is presented." And indeed, if you think of the current day most famous magicians, the ones that are working in Las Vegas, Mr. Copperfield and Mr. Angel, they have quite some flair to their shows. You have to have flair to be able to distract that person in front of you from whatever that secret thing you're pulling out from behind your back. And that is really how the magic can perpetuate. This seemingly impossible task is really presented by a showman. And often I find myself trying to replicate that, at least in my life. Even if I don't completely know if I'm going to be able to pull something off. I just have that demeanor, and usually people believe me and it works. In preparing for this presentation, I was reminded, and also cleaning our house, just doing a little bit of spring cleaning, I ran across a business card from an old friend, Thomas MEIER, who you see here on the left. He and I were in college at the same time, as well as Bellamy Blackstone here on the right. She is the youngest daughter of a very famous world musician, a magician rather, and at the time they were both in college, college freshmen. Harry Blackstone, of course, was world-renowned, and he came from a very, very important and established magic family. He was a junior, and his father used him as an infant in his magic acts. Similarly, Bellamy was used as an infant in her father's magic acts. And Thomas lived next door to another famous magician, Doug Henning, and as a toddler, he really became entranced with the world of magic. Just so happened that in addition to being an amazing, accomplished magician, he was also my boyfriend's roommate. And so I got to learn a little bit about magic through Thomas. And in fact, Thomas is a prodigy. He won the youngest MICROMAGIC world champion title in 1998. He was only 19 years old. And the trick that won him that MICROMAGIC, meaning in-person magic rather than the big illusion where you make a train disappear, this trick he learned, and he spent a year and a half perfecting, was to take an audience member's wedding ring, and through some distractions was able to then replicate it further away down the audience in an ice cube. And so that trick basically paid for his college education, because he sold it to David Copperfield for many thousands of dollars. I'm not sure what that trick is being used for today, but Thomas created it and won this really prestigious title. In addition to being a magician and a really great guy, Thomas was also a devout Buddhist and a physics major as well as a theater major. So he was searching. He always was looking for that meaning, right? And magic was one path that would allow him to find meaning in life. As part of his theater studies, he was putting on a little short play, and he asked my boyfriend Thomas, a different Thomas, and myself at the time to help him prepare for this presentation. And so this act was really a replayment of a scene of the Buddha's life, wherein a rich young girl, Sujata, played by me, really wanted a husband and a child and tried so long. You may know this story, actually, if you are a student of Buddhism. And she prayed to this tree god to give her her wishes. And as it so happened, she found a husband and she had a child, and she was extremely happy. And so she decided she was going to repay this tree god by providing a delicious rice pudding, rice milk dish. And so she was very rich, and she had thousands of cows. So from the best cows, she collected their milk, and she was able to then take that milk and feed it to 500 other cows, and so on until this milk was just so concentrated and sweet and rich. And she made this milk rice that she took in a golden bowl to the tree god. And as it so happens, at the time, the Buddha was sitting under this tree in the process of becoming enlightened. He had not eaten or drank or really moved in many weeks, and this was the first nourishment that he was going to have before reaching nirvana. So my job in this play was to very carefully take a pitcher of milk and to pour it into this magic bowl that the Buddha would then take, and Buddha, being Thomas MEIER, would then levitate, showing enlightenment. I wasn't a very good assistant. I didn't take it very seriously. I could have practiced a lot more, and I also don't have great rhythms, so I ended up missing a beat and poured out the milk a little too soon. Didn't completely ruin the trick, but I noticed it, and he gave me a little bit of a stink eye, like, oh, you should have done that a little better. Nonetheless, Thomas levitated. Everybody was amazed, and you know, thankfully they forgot about me. One thing I love about the Tao, and also about science, you may have gathered, is that it is, for me, a way to deconstruct magic. So the outside world, the world period, how do we make sense of it? How do I engage with it and really seek that connection, as we all talk about in these Sunday meetings, the connection with the One, the ultimate meaning, as it were. And for me, science and the Tao are really fantastic tool sets to allow us to be able to do that, to find that tricky thing and deconstruct it, figure it out, which is only half of the battle, is just really understanding how the trick works. The second half, as I learned when I was practicing with Thomas and that milk trick, is practice. It really just takes so much practice. It's one thing to know how to do the trick, but it's another to have done it so many times that it just is a finesse. It comes across seamlessly to the point where others are thinking, how does she do that? Automagically. Arthur C. Clarke, very famous science fiction writer, he had 3 laws of effective science fiction, is that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I see that every day. You know, as we were talking, this online experience itself is just incredible. It came from our minds, but also from the minds of Silicon Valley and so many other entrepreneurs and computer scientists and geeks to bring us together in this interconnected way. And even if you're listening to me on this recording later, what a fantastic opportunity to be able to capture these moments and to replay them in the future. It is truly magical. But other magic exists, especially the ones that we don't understand and we don't notice, rather. This book is fantastic, and I would show you the actual book, except like many things that I love, I tend to share and overshare, and I don't even remember who I last lent this book to. I think I've bought about 3 or 4 copies in my life and given them away again. But this book is called Outside Lies Magic, and it helped change my life, really. I read it as a freshman in college, and I'm going to read to you. It's kind of hard to see here, but Beginning History and Awareness in Everyday Places, written by a Harvard historian. And it really investigates the magical infrastructure that surrounds us. One of the great examples that Mr. Stilgo has in his book, where a lot of it is focused on railroads, especially because it really traces the history of our industrialization and our modernization here in the United States. But one of the fantastic things is just to look up and to look down. If you look up in most major cities, you'll see a series of cables bringing you television and electricity and all sorts of movement of electrons and magic into your home. And then if you look down, you'll likely also see manhole covers. And that's what I find most fantastic, because one of the things in America that stands us apart is that we have infrastructure up the wazoo. There is so much infrastructure, and to an extent we definitely need to pay more attention to it because it is beginning to deteriorate. But this is a manhole cover for Seattle City Light, and as you can see, it has a really beautiful decorative motif. It's very Native American, Pacific Northwest tribal art that they incorporated into this one particular manhole cover, which I noticed the other day, actually yesterday, when Frank and I were downtown shopping. And I had to stop. I was doing this presentation. I was like, what a gorgeous object. I was the only one taking photos of that thing. Most people were taking selfies of themselves or of the Space Needle or Park Place Market, and meanwhile they would walk right over this grate, which I think is even more fantastic because it is a portal to all of the wonderful utilities that exist below our feet. In fact, Frank and I, we were talking about this presentation, talking about magic, and he's like, how are you going to relate it back to the Tao? Well, to speak the truth, I think he and I both practice magic every day in our work lives. This is a picture before and after of my company's office. I actually sit right over here behind this plant. A few years ago, we needed a major renovation. The guys had basically gotten 2x4s, nailed them together, and called it a shelf. So it was a little embarrassing for a very prominent engineering and consulting firm. And we interviewed several architects, and it just didn't work out with their schedules and our budget and our time frame. And I mentioned that Frank does interior design, and we brought him on. And I cannot begin to tell you how much magic he worked in this scenario, because we had people who had very distinct personalities and requests, and he was able to manage them all with the very tight budget, small budget that we had, and tight time frame to also turn it around. And it looks really great. One of the things we also did is that we upgraded our HVAC system, so we got rid of this big duct, and we have this new technology called variable refrigerant flow, using the magic properties of refrigerants to move heating and cooling instead of doing it through the air. And in my life, that's one of the things, in fact, all week I spent working with architects and engineers of other trades, structural and civil, trying to hide all the pipes that are going to go into buildings, that are going to deliver their hot water, their cold water, their air, their ventilation, and just putting it in such a space that it's going to be hidden and people will not know the difference and basically be comfortable and not have any complaints. And for me, that is the magic, is how to become invisible so that you do something where people don't even notice that they have been impacted by your work. And so with that, I'm going to wrap it up with my recipe for the week. I'm calling it magic mushrooms. Even with my cooking, I'm a fairly good cook, but I tend to be kind of humble about it. But this dish, I guarantee, I have literally been told has changed people's lives. They're like, this is the most amazing dish I've ever had. So here's my secret recipe for them. If you don't like garlic, you may not enjoy this as much, but I really like garlic. So several garlic cloves, about a teaspoon of red crushed pepper, about a quarter teaspoon of Szechuan pepper, which is a fantastic ingredient. It also has a bit of a numbing effect on your tongue. Salt and pepper and a little bit of olive oil. Throw that all into a small blender until it's completely emulsified. There's another secret ingredient I'm not going to tell you there, but if you ever come to my home, you can taste it. Nonetheless, just those ingredients I showed you are going to make it magic. Take those mushrooms and just completely slather them and put them in the fridge for about an hour. You can even leave them in overnight and then throw them on the grill. I was also roasting a couple chilies there. So fantastic. Grill about 2 to 3 minutes on each side, and then once you're done, you can chop them up and serve them basically any way you want. In a salad, we had them in a wrap. You can do fajitas, you can do tacos, you can anything. Your imagination is totally open, but those mushrooms are going to be the foundation and the flavor that is really going to stand out. So I hope you try that trick and let me know how it works for you. And with that, I'm going to leave you with a quote from my friend Thomas's mentor. As I mentioned, Doug Henning was his neighbor and taught him a lot about magic. And in preparing for this presentation, I learned that Doug Henning actually had a television series, Doug Henning's World of Magic, back in the 70s, hosted by Bill Cosby. And at the end of his magic performance, he would always tell the audience the same thing. He would say, "Anything the mind can conceive is possible. Nothing is impossible. All you have to do is look within, and you can realize your fondest dreams." I would like to wish each and every one of you all of life's wonders and a joyful age of enlightenment. With that, I hope you try one magic trick this week. As I mentioned, it's enough to know the secret to the trick, but it's another to practice it. And if you find yourself having negative thoughts and negative emotions during the week, see if you can take some of Bill's really wise advice he just gave us earlier. You have the ability to change your aspect and your reaction to life, but it is hard. And maybe you can discard old habits and old ways of thinking and try to see if you can perform that magic trick of switching negativity into a positive outcome for yourself. Thank you, everyone.